Yo ho ho, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, 4th of July, all that shit. So, for lack of a better topic today, because I literally do not want to sit here and talk about any of the hot topics of the moment. Just not in the mood for it. I had to listen to it all at work, had to listen to it, on social media. Like, I'm just kind of fed up with all the social and political BS lately. So I picked a topic that is pretty apolitical, but still useful. Um, if you've been watching my channel a while, you know I am for lack of easier term, a ham. Not the comedy kind, uh, the amateur radio kind. And I have a general class license, so most of the stuff that people play with is available to me. If you don't have a general class. If you only have a tech license or no license, if you don't have a tech license, get one. It's easy. Um, Literally a couple hours of studying with one of the online like phone apps, and go take the test on a Saturday or Sunday morning. But even if you don't, a GMRS radio system, you can just pay the fee and be good. They're way better than the stuff that's free. The FRS stuff is basically useless past like I can see you. I'm looking at you. You're right there, kind of stuff. Like even inside a mall, if you are not looking at each other across the hall, FRS is pretty pointless. If you're at a big event, maybe, kind of. But if you're at like an amusement park, GMRS works way better than FRS, just for keeping family coordinated. Cell phones obviously work. In the modern age, cell phones are the way, right? But it's a lot easier to hand your 8-year-old a little radio that's locked on a frequency, and they can hit the button, "Hey, mom," than a cell phone, right? For the rest of us, radios are a handy way to communicate when other systems either don't work because the system is down, or you are not willing to use them for whatever reason. Now, this is not to say that radio is somehow secure. In no way, shape, or form. If you do not have serious government level encryption on your radio, anyone and their brother can be listening in, and is. The channels and privacy codes that they talk about, particularly the privacy codes, they make it sound like other people can't listen. It's the other way around. It's that you're only hearing the other person using your privacy code. Everybody on that channel is hearing you, unless they have also set a privacy code. So when you were looking at privacy codes on a GMRS or FRS, just assume that everybody on the same channel as you is listening. Anybody who wants to can change channels whenever they want, can scan and listen in. It's one of the entertaining things to do with amateur radio is to listen. And people have all sorts of crazy conversations. One of my personal favorites is when I was living in Connecticut. I'm on lunch break, sitting in my car, on the radio. I have my radio, and I'm reading. And all of a sudden, I hear some kids running around, talking as they're running around playing a game of hide and seek on the radio. They had found their parents' radios, managed to get them on the same frequency, and were literally playing, like, I don't know, it was sort of hide and seek, sort of not, on the radio to a repeater that covers pretty much all of Connecticut. And they had no idea. I mean, these kids sounded like they were 5 or 6 years old. Somebody is watching them, but like not watching them. And maybe they were a little older than that, maybe like 8. But they were having a blast. And no one, I mean, this is a popular repeater, not real busy, but common use. Like there's probably 100 people listening. No one said anything. No one was like, hey, kids, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, put the radios back. Not a peep. Everybody was just listening and enjoying these kids having fun for like an hour. I mean, like they were at it for a while. I imagine that they only stopped because the radios ran out of power. Because if you're using little handheld radios, they were transmitting a lot. I mean, they were constantly back and forth with each other. And I'm guessing they just ran out of juice. But hysterical, and it was fun. Was it technically illegal? Sure, but it's only illegal in the sense that anybody's going to care if you're interfering with somebody else's communications, and you know, is what it is. There were other repeaters. There's other systems. There's other ways. Nobody was being inconvenienced. It was just fun. But say I am where I am. I am in Bernie, Texas. If there's an emergency, the power's out, the cell phone towers are not working properly or are overwhelmed, because certainly if there's any kind of natural disaster, it doesn't take a lot to overwhelm cell phone towers. It really doesn't. At a local level, you can swamp one pretty fast. So you just can't get a hold of anybody. You can't, talk to somebody else and say, hey, do you need me to come get you? Are you okay where you're at? Whatever. Radio works. Radio, as long as each person has a functional radio and knows what frequency to be on or can scan, it works. It has a limited range for smaller radios. With a little planning, with a little extra equipment, you have essentially unlimited range. For example, even with my relatively modest setup that I no longer have, but that I had, I could talk to people a state away when I was in Connecticut. It is not difficult to have a relatively modest setup that if you are high enough, around here, if you're up on one of the hills in the hill country, with a decent antenna, with even just 5 watts. Now, this has to be the right kind of radio, not a little handheld, but relatively, battery powered, mild power. You're not talking anything crazy. To talk to another country, and I'm not talking just to Mexico. Like you could talk to Canada, you could talk to California, you could talk to New York, you could talk to Florida. You can talk to even down to Panama. It is not difficult if you have basic knowledge. Exactly, motivator. You just have to know how to do it beforehand, because it isn't simple in the technical sense. It's not difficult, but you don't just throw it together. You have to have a certain bit of gear. You have to know how to use it, how to set it up, why you're having this interference, why you're having this problem. Because the difference between a setup working and a setup not working could be as simple as your ground wire not being the right kind, or not being grounded, not realizing you need to ground it, not realizing that you need a ground plane. Right, or lack thereof. No solar flare, and the signals are lousy. But it really is one of those things where a little prior experience and practice goes a long way. And if you don't try it, if you don't have any experience, you basically have a short range walkie-talkie. Because let's face it, it takes very little knowledge to use a Baofeng, even one of the regular handhelds, much less one of the GMRS, to talk in your neighborhood. That's easy, and it's very useful, because say you want to coordinate 10 people, you're in the equivalent of Seattle during the riots, and you would like to be able to coordinate your local neighborhood watch. You have people looking out for trouble, and they're going to let everybody else know. If somebody sees somebody coming, a truckload of yahoos coming down the road, they can let people know, and you can coordinate a response. this is a good thing to use radio for rather than cell phone. Cell phones work, but now you've got to get a group text going and people start to chatter. People start to, type. Voice, you can convey a lot more information very quickly. And if somebody's not a radio person, they're very unlikely to sit there and chatter. Or they are too likely to sit there and chatter, and you tell them to shut up unless they have something important. That's another issue, though. But they're very handy for that because you can have 50 people, 100 people, 1,000 people on that frequency. And as long as they have some basic radio discipline, it works because one person can transmit and everybody hears it. Works. And you can hand key people multiple radios so that they can be on different frequencies. So, hey, the only people that should be talking are the lookouts if they see something important. And they are only talking on a frequency that goes back to, meaning the only people on that frequency that are listening are the people back at camp, at the main coordinated area. Everybody else, yeah, you can set the radio that you're not listening on that frequency. You're transmitting on it, but you're not listening. That takes a little coordination, takes a little practice, takes a little experience. Certain radios can't do it. These are things, if you have that scenario, you have to enforce radio discipline. Don't talk. Do not reply if you are not the person that is supposed to reply. But if you practice this once in a while, it works. If you don't ever practice it, it's chaos. I don't know what age group we've got paying attention, if anybody's even in here, but who's watching this later. Most of my viewers are of the right age to have played video games, particularly MMOs of some sort or first-person shooters where you're on a team. Think about how well it goes when you have a coordinated team with voice comms, when people shut up and let coordination work, where the only person talking at any given moment is the person who needs to be talking. Everybody else is listening. And that it's under control, it's smooth, versus the chaos that ensues with a pickup group when everybody's talking, you can't understand anybody, and there's some freaking 8-year-old screaming, that he's going to kill you. This is not helpful. It makes it very difficult to coordinate and have good communication. Practice. Now, I'm not saying to practice for a neighborhood-wide riot, lookout. Could be a barbecue. Could be, a street party. It could be anything. It could be as simple as, you know what? The first Saturday of the month, everybody gets out their radios, make sure they work, and we all check in every hour. Just keep it on you. Keep it on, keep it with you. And every hour, you check in. And one person, there's a kid outside, okay. One person is supposed to check in first, and then the next person, after they hear that person go, checks in, and so on down the line. And they know, they practiced, they get experience doing this so they don't talk over each other. So that person one checks in at 1:15, say. Well, person number two waits to hear that person. If they don't hear them by 1:20, they start, because person number one may be not available for whatever reason. They have gone on a drive somewhere, battery died, they keeled over dead. But the person at the center of the net can then go, at the end of the check-ins, go, hey, person number one, are you there? You figure out a system. And there's ways to do this. There are systems for this. This is something that a lot of groups that support local events use. And you can practice it very easily, but everybody has to have their license. which means you have to do a little prep work ahead of time. The time to do that is not when you need it. The time to do that is before you need it, just like anything. In terms of radios themselves, yeah, spend as much or as little as you want. Honestly, as far as handhelds go, the bow things are not bad. They really aren't. They're crappy construction. They're cheesy. They get a lot of hate. But honestly, they work. Their signal to noise ratio is okay. Their speaker quality is but honestly, I didn't have any problems with mine. They really work. And if you're not into the hobby for the sake of the hobby, a couple bow fangs, so you've got a spare, a couple spare radio, a couple spare batteries, a charger or two, and a decent antenna on it, you're good. Shove it all in a little bag, you're good. I have a little, uh, I don't know, it's like an accessory bag that has MOLLE straps if I want to hook it onto a plate carrier or another backpack. And it holds my little Yaesu handheld. It holds a larger antenna than I leave on the radio. It holds a longer antenna that is folded over. Spare battery, a USB charger, and a one of those little battery packs to charge it. And the whole thing is smaller than a little toiletries kit. In the past, I have fit two bow fangs in there. As it sits now, I have extra room because my assumption is I'm going to throw other stuff in there. I'll throw in phone chargers, a larger battery pack, whatever. But it's just handy. It's an easy thing to have. But the key is to have it. The key is to have a little practice with it. The key is to know what the repeaters are in your area and have them pre-programmed, because programming repeaters on a handheld when you're not used to doing it sucks. Every time I do mine, every time I have to look it up. I have to pull up the PDF I have, and I have it printed out, the relevant pages printed out and stored, but I also have it as a PDF on my computers, and look it up and sit there and follow the guide because I never remember how to do it. So every time I go to a new spot, new area, and I'm like, how do I program in a repeater again? Crap. Because I just can't remember how to do it. It's, you don't do that very often. That's the kind of thing you do when you get to a new area, and then you don't do it again. And if you're like me, that's a very rare thing. High frequency is what you would use for any kind of distance. The high frequency stuff, approaching VHF, is what you would want for a local system, a local network. It is very good for, hey, somebody's up on a hill and they want to be able to coordinate a larger area. If everybody who's reporting into that person and to share information around the area can reach that person via HF, great. If you have a smaller region, because that could be 2-3 counties, even in Texas, a smaller region, VHF works. Somebody up on a hill who can hear and transmit to everybody can cover a lot of territory. And I mean, it could be a hill, it could be a building. Repeaters are very often on top of a building or up on a cell tower. And if you're not a radio person, the repeaters are basically a radio system that signal comes in and gets retransmitted out on a different frequency at much more power. So for example, if I'm transmitting at 5 watts on frequency 1, that's not how this works, but frequency 1, transmitting, but no one can hear me except that repeater because I'm in a spot where there's nobody else in range. But that repeater is uphill. It's up here. And it's transmitting at 500 watts, 1,000 watts. Well, it's covering a massive area. Could be hundreds of miles. And suddenly my little 5-watt signal that barely made it to that repeater can be heard 100 miles away. And I could hear the other person back because they could reach that repeater, or a connected repeater. That's the other key thing. A lot of repeaters are connected through the internet or by another frequency, because the repeaters can talk to each other by a third frequency. It gets very esoteric. People can do weird things. And the key is that by the use of a repeater, you can talk over a much bigger area than your little radio can reach. And it gives you the ability to communicate over a broader area as long as that repeater works. But if you're using this for emergency communications, you need a plan for, how do I talk to Joe Schmo that I can only normally talk to via the repeater if the repeater doesn't work. Repeaters are powered. It needs energy. If their generator goes down, if that tower goes down, it doesn't work. So is there a spot that, hey, if we haven't talked to each other, for 2 days, and we can't get a hold of each other otherwise, we each at noon on the third day, so to speak, we each drive up to these peaks, these hilltops that should be in reach of each other. That, yeah, we're still 50 miles away, but we can, the radios will reach if it's a line of sight. And you give it a try. Even if you can't quite understand the person, you at least know the other person made it to that hilltop, right? So they're doing okay. If you're really into this, you would have what's called a mobile rig, which is a larger antenna on your VHF system, and you can have a higher power VHF system because it's plugged into your car as opposed to a little walkie-talkie. But you'd be amazed what you can do with just a better antenna. A little walkie-talkie size thing, but with a serious, 5-foot tall antenna up high. Yeah, that's no joke. I have a little baby antenna, and I'm ground level basically. I mean, you're 6 feet tall, say. Your radio's here, and you're standing, on a little rise. The range on that, a mile and a half. That whole 5 mile bullshit that they claim, no. It's 5 miles in a straight line and there's nothing in the way. But it is not something you pick up and get good at in an afternoon. However, it's something that you can rapidly add to your arsenal in a couple weekends for the basics. It doesn't take a whole lot. And that at that point, you will know where the resources are to then say, hey, let me go download more information and just save it. I don't need to make that antenna, but I can download the information. And if things get to the point where I want to make that antenna, I can go get the materials. There's nothing that crazy. Or maybe you buy a couple of the parts that are hard to get and have them tucked away. And you're like, the wire is not super specific. I can get wire, right? But the baling is not easy to get. And I won't get into what that is. Or, these connectors are not easy to get. So you buy them. You pre-buy those things. And you've got them tucked away. You're like, I don't need them right now, but maybe. But, even if you don't have the radio, even if all you've got is a handheld, you can add a serious antenna to your handheld. I know it looks like I've got a lazy eye when I do this. You can add wow, it drives me nuts. You can add a serious antenna to your handheld, no problem. You can do it. It's not hard. Now, does it get you crazy range? No. But say let's see. Say a 3-foot antenna. or 1 meter antenna instead of a 6-inch antenna? Well, VHF is called the 2 meter band for a reason. The signals are a 2 meter waveform. If your antenna is 1 meter tall, you are a good, consistent percentage of that. You're not some weird off, percentage, off ratio. You are half. You are a half waveform antenna. That's a good thing. You're getting most of that signal every time. You'll have a better quality result. When you transmit, you'll have a better quality result. It'd be ideal if you had a 2 meter long antenna, 6 feet, right? Roughly. Which is why my external antenna that I had was 6 feet tall. It was mounted, very close to ground level in a room and was almost to the ceiling. And lo and behold, I could talk using that way better than my little handheld could with the same amount of horsepower, the same amount of watts. It's the antenna, not the watts, that determines your reception quality, first of all, and then determines how good your signal is going out. More watts is not bad, but it doesn't take a ton of watts with a good antenna. But you have to know what a good antenna is. If you don't know, and if you don't understand what's going on, it doesn't work. That's what you learn when you take the courses and when you study for the test to be a ham operator, an amateur radio operator. So we are at half an hour. I am going to call it quits. I would like to get some other stuff done before I go to bed tonight. So take care, have fun, stay safe, and look into taking your tech license. If you haven't already done it, it's not hard. There are guides online. There is let me look up. There's a YouTube channel. Let me do it on here. Yeah. So there is a YouTube channel called Ham Radio Crash Course. And it's run by a guy named Josh. He lives in California. And he started the channel as like a group class to pass the test, basically. And since then, it's grown into a lot of other stuff. But it basically is a guide channel. It's a discussion and a tutorial DIY kind of stuff for ham radio. But he does a whole lot of live streams and such related to passing the course. And it's key. There's also hang on, guys. I'm looking for what the app is. I believe it's Ham Radio Exam. Yeah. Ham Radio Exam, and you would want the tech one to start with, by Roy Watson. Maybe there's another one. Well, I'm sure there's another one, but I think that's the one I used. And really, if you're just going for your tech license, it may be the easiest thing to literally just go to the practice test and take it over and 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 over, because it cycles through the questions. The key is, don't do that and then think, well, I passed, I'm good. Because there's a lot of questions. Every time you do it, you might get a different set of questions. So when you go and take the test, you don't get the questions you got on the one you passed. Oops. You want to make sure that you can routinely get either a perfect score or an almost perfect score over and over and over and over. But this is not rocket science. Like, this is really not. There's a very small amount of basic math involved, and I'm betting that even if you fail all the test questions on a given exam that are math related, you'll still pass. So even if you're horrible at the math, even if you literally cannot process 1 plus 1, you could probably still pass by getting everything else right. Um, and the math on the tech course is not. We're not talking complicated stuff here. It's really not. The goal of the tech license is to get you into the hobby, is to get you started so that you are involved and then learning to then get your general and then your extra. Extra lets you do almost anything with the amateur radio stuff. You're still limited, but like inside of that set of frequencies, you can do almost anything. Um, General is almost everything anybody does who's not a total radio geek. Um, and I don't say that disparagingly, but if you're not like hardcore into amateur radio, general, you're good. Any of the normal communication stuff, general covers. If you're just looking for curious things to do, they literally have TV over HF radio. It's very slow, but you can do it. Um, there's doing this over the internet, which is very strange, but it works. It's a thing. Like there's all sorts of crazy things. There's text based. Um, just in general, there are a ton of crazy different things you can do with amateur radio. Just as a can you do it? Can I make this work kind of thing? If you're a tinkerer, um, I don't get into most of that. I literally view it for myself as a emergency communications setup, the ability to talk to somebody at a distance when normal communications don't work. And yeah, everybody's got different priorities, right? I know people that use it day in and day out to coordinate with their family because they just don't feel like using cell phones and it works. Or they live on a ranch where, if they're out far enough on their ranch, there's no cell phone reception or it's spotty. Radio works. They've got a big antenna at the house, and even if their radio can't reach the house directly, it can reach that antenna, so the person at the house can hear them. But if the person was standing outside on a little walkie-talkie, they wouldn't be able to hear them. But because the house radio is going through the antenna up top, it's on top of a barn, it's on top of the house, it's a tall antenna. Height is very important. Height and antenna quality. But anyway, take care, have fun, stay safe, y'all. Stay out of trouble.